I'm Naomi Judy Shintani. If you haven't met me, I've worked on the BART exhibition in the San Bruno BART station that with Jennifer and Melanie and a lot of people. It was a 3-year project. But today we wanted to put together a panel of people that make art about remembrance and in different communities. And so it's been my great pleasure to invite the artists that are going to be speaking today. I know Patricia for a long time, and so you're going to enjoy hearing about her work. And Carlos, I've just met over the last year, and he's really dynamic and has a great history. He has a studio here too, right, at Tanforan?
Somewhat, yes.
Yes, okay. And then Paul Kitagaki has come all the way from Sacramento, and he also is featured in the BART exhibition and is going to talk about his work. And I think you're on the committee for the memorial also. Yeah. And then we also have Diana Lee, who's from AWA, and she's going to be talking about archiving and keeping the Asian American women's art alive and front and forward. Okay, so, and then where's Valerie? Oh, here's Valerie. Valerie's going to be moderating. So anyway, I hope you'll all enjoy it. I think it's going to be a very interesting panel discussion. Stephen.
Yes.
I want to introduce Stephen Seymour, this is his place, and and he actually invited the Sansei granddaughters, a group of Sansei women artists that did an exhibition here, and it was quite successful. And now he's been a big proponent of promoting and the history of the Tanforan Detention Center.
Yes. So yeah, I'll just say a couple of minutes. We moved into the mall can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay, so we moved into the mall. I saw an opportunity, and what I wanted to do was support artists, and I believe that art speaks to communities. And what show and who should it speak to first? If I were to move into Tanforan, it should speak to the Sansei granddaughters. So I've met Judy Shintani about a year ago, and we had a show last August, and it was very, very successful. And it was my pleasure to support that show and to help educate the greater community about what this space once was, so that we as people don't repeat that again. What we do here is provide a space for artists at a low cost. I created a foundation, the Peninsula Art Foundation, so that we could bring artists in and not charge them an arm and a leg to do their creating. And as Judy said, Naomi said, Carlos Kuki Gonzalez is one of the artists that is part of our collective. So it's my pleasure. After today, at the end of today, we have another event. So anyone who wants to stay around, we have a nationally renowned artist, Dick Terms. He shows around across the globe, and he is the one who did these globes in the window. He was lucky enough to meet MC Escher before MC Escher passed. He's friends with MC Escher's son, and a lot of his work kind of has that feel to it. Again, it's my pleasure to support this panel discussion today and this important event, and thank you very much for using our location to carry this conversation. It's very important. Thank you, Judy.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Good to see some of you that came from the tour earlier, but if you don't know me, my name is Melanie Alvena. I'm the Programs and Communications Manager for Asian American Women Artists Association. You'll hear us refer to it as AWA for short. So we are the community partner that was part of the Tanforan Incarceration 1942 Resilience Behind Barbed Wire exhibit that's over at the BART station. But we wanted to do an event around honoring not only the 8,000 Japanese American incarcerees who came in through Tanforan at the Tanforan, which were on the former site of the Tanforan Assembly Center, but we also wanted to, connect it to what's going on today and to the artists that are still doing this kind of work. And so we decided to do this event, the Art of Resilience. So Melanie talked a little bit about it, but we had some tours down there. We have this panel discussion, and then we're going to do another tour and a memorial walkthrough. So thank you so much for coming here. It's so great to see a packed house for our artists. We're going to get to hear more about them. Just a little bit about AWA. We are a nonprofit arts organization based in San Francisco, founded in 1989. And our mission is to increase the visibility and representation of Asian American women in the arts. And so Jennifer Easton, who I'll introduce in a little bit, from the BART Art Program, reached out to me a few years ago saying, hey, I want to do this exhibit. There was the one that Paul Kitagaki was part of, but we wanted to bring in more of the history and the context around this specific time in history, especially now today where Day of Remembrance was just last week. And so we wanted to sort of plug in and honor some of that. What else? But yeah, so happy to have you all here, and thank you for coming to the panel. I'm gonna hand it over now to Jennifer Easton from the BART Art Program. She's gonna talk a little bit about the program for like a couple minutes.
30 minutes.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm not going to talk very long because we've got amazing panels. So I just want to thank you all for coming. And I think Steve said it very well. I mean, I think bringing history alive where it occurred is a really important part of what our program does, connecting to communities. For those of you who come through the BART station, you can see posters of a new campaign we just did with an amazing artist whose name I'll butcher, Amanda Fitta, I can never remember her name. Her handle is some long last name. So I'm excused for, I can type it out, but not. Anyway, but it's around domestic violence. And domestic violence does occur in the transit system. We also have a campaign about safety for young girls and gender expansive youth in our system that features artists. So we're really trying to connect to issues through art. And so we're thrilled with the artists, the contemporary artists who joined us for this exhibit. We're thrilled to honor the artists who were at Tanforan, who helped to help people to manage their lives during the incarceration. And we're really thrilled that you're here to share this information and this history and to carry forward the value of artists and keeping our community. So thank you all very much for coming, and please enjoy.
All right. I'd like to all the panelists, if you could please come up and take your spots. Thank you. Yes, very, very official. While they're getting settled, I'm just going to introduce to you really quick our moderator, Valerie So, who's at the end there with the purple hair. Since 1986, Valerie So's experimental videos, installations, and documentary films have won awards and have exhibited at venues such as the J. Paul Getty Museum in Los Angeles, the Museum of Modern Art, and the New Museum in New York City, and at festivals worldwide. Her feature documentary Love Boat Taiwan from 2019 won the Audience Award at the Urban Nomad Film Festival in Taipei and has played to sold-out festival audiences across North America and Taiwan. She is currently in production for the feature documentary We Go Down Sewing, the Auntie Sewing Squad. So let's welcome Valerie, our moderator.
Hello. Oh, there we go. I'm going to talk in this because I'm a deaf person, really deaf, so I like to have people talking in mics myself. And also I've got a mask on, so it's easier for y'all. So, so we're going to look at these 4 fabulous artists and see a little bit about their work. And I just want to talk about this word resilience a little bit because it just makes me think of not only something that's strong, but something that endures, right? Resilience. So I'm hoping we can maybe delve a little bit into that with each person's work. And I don't know, we're not sitting in the right order, but that's okay. So, so we're just gonna dive in here. We have about 10 minutes for each person, and then at the end we'll have Q&A if you folks have any questions. And it's really great to see this amazing turnout. This is wonderful. So, okay, so we're gonna start with this lovely person here, Carlos Cookie Gonzalez. Carlos Cookie Gonzalez is a muralist, retired probation officer, and cancer survivor. Me too. Drawing and painting since childhood, his art reflects the life he experienced growing up in San Francisco's barrio, the Mission District, including movements and activism in politics, art and music from the 60s through today. As a delinquent street kid, he assisted community muralists as a community service. I guess that was like your thing you had to do right after you got into some trouble. At San Francisco State, which is also I teach at San Francisco State, so it's great. He apprenticed with renowned veteran muralists Chuy Campuzano, Ray Patlan, and Mike Rios. Acquiring a degree in ethnic studies, yay, Gonzalez worked for 25 years as a probation officer, giving back to his community through mural projects with troubled local youth, while moonlighting on private commissions, community, and commercial murals. And he just let me know he did the really beautiful Cesar Chavez mural at San Francisco State, among many others. He retired in May 2015 and is now happily living the dream as an artist. Please welcome Carlos.
I don't need the mic. Well, she just said my life story. I was going to tell you guys, but she already read it. So I guess basically how I got started in art was kind of like my little bio. A little more detail about it is that my parents came from Mexico. They were immigrants from Mexico in the 1950s. I was born in San Francisco in 1958. And I grew up in the 60s. I'm a child of the 60s. And around that time, I went to Catholic school. My father was a strict disciplinarian and my mom was the soft side. I grew up with the yin and yang there. And growing up watching the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, a lot of activism throughout my childhood, my life. I saw the assassinations on TV, Martin Luther King, Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Medgar Evers, all that stuff. So a lot of the activism in the Mission District was a big influence because I was attracted to the street life and I got involved as a young man with my neighborhood gang. Wound up getting in trouble and got for auto theft. And in 1973, I went to juvie and got put on probation. So around that summer of 74, when part of my punishment was to do community service with muralists. And I had always been the classroom artist throughout my childhood. My father noticed that I was an artist and would have me have a drawing for him every day when he got home from work throughout elementary school from 1st to 8th grade. And when I got into junior high school, I wound up starting to get in trouble. And once I got in trouble, I got put on probation. One of my assignments was community service with muralists at Garfield Park in San Francisco. The Garfield Park mural was spearheaded by a guy named Domingo Rivera. And I guess I took like a fish to water. I'm pretty much self-taught. I didn't go to art school. So I learned by doing murals with actual veteran muralists. I learned how to paint, how to mix color, how to do sketches and designing murals throughout all that time. And I got involved with the community agency that was active in the mission called the Real Alternatives Program. And they helped me get away from the streets and more into community activism and organizing. And rather than fighting against my peers and teens and my own people, I wound up becoming an activist and fighting for my people in the community. I wound up getting into the EOP program and wound up at San Francisco State, where I got my degree in ethnic studies. And throughout that time, I did a couple of murals in the school. I graduated and wound up becoming a probation officer in the place I got locked up as a kid. and for 25 years, I was a probation officer there, and continued painting murals that I started off doing in the community. And one of the murals that I first did in 1980 as an outreach worker with gang kids in the mission was this mural right here, right behind me. This was painted in 1981 with some homies from my old neighborhood where I grew up. I came back as an outreach worker and started getting young kids in the gangs involved. And to my surprise, many of them were quite artistic and open to painting murals. And so this mural was done as part of outreach for AIDS and HIV prevention. There's a lot of intravenous drug users in the Mission District. We were doing outreach to find out, to do a study on the drug habits of youth and adults in the neighborhood and how we could prevent AIDS from being transmitted amongst IV drug users. And we were the first to do that type of outreach in the early 80s when AIDS was still a mystery. And we were handing out bleach and condoms to dope fiends on the street. And part of that study was to get youth involved to find out what they were doing, how they were getting high, and educating them about AIDS and AIDS awareness. And that was throughout my college career. And after I graduated and somehow backed into the probation department, I wound up doing more murals with community youth. And that mural right there, the Cesar Chavez mural, I did with gang kids in the mission. Some of them were my probationers. Others were knuckleheads from the neighborhood. That we did this mural on the theme of Cesar Chavez. And the artwork was used to inspire and educate youth who otherwise would be probably getting in trouble. And the part about why we do art is mostly, in my experience, art was used to educate, to give history lessons to some of the youth who weren't aware of their history, and instill pride about culture and art and music. And in the Mission District, music and art were just flourishing and influencing a lot of people. And it saved my life, literally by getting me involved with murals and the community and music and enjoying music. And so after we did that mural, this other one, the Santana mural, I did with one of my mentors, Michael Rios. And that was dedicated to Carlos Santana, and we painted that in 1986. And that mural was a grant from the mayor's office of San Francisco. And at that time, it was unheard of to get $50,000 for a mural in 1986, and that's what we got. I designed the original concept, and then Mike Rios added his ideas, and it became a collaborative effort. And this was one of the biggest murals in San Francisco at the time. It's a 3-story apartment building, and we painted it in honor of Carlos Santana, who was a neighborhood hero who inspired a lot. He went to Mission High, I went to Mission High, and we were really proud of him and his worldwide fame. And so we dedicated the mural to Carlos Santana. He actually came to the dedication ceremony. His father's mariachi band played at the dedication ceremony, and we had posters made. It was a big event. And so little by little, I was learning as I was going, and the murals today continue to instill pride and to educate youth. And that's probably why I'm still doing it, because it helped me grow as a person and learn about my history and culture. And as a probation officer, once I became a PO, that mural there is in the courtroom building at the Juvenile Probation Department. It's called Education is Liberation. And in that mural, I used some of my probationers to do work hours with me to help paint that mural. And basically, it represents, the guy holding the book is a guy who has 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And basically, being in gangs, you're flirting with death, you're on the fence. You never know what's gonna happen based on that. And the other half is the part where you get out of it. And so some of the graduates have broken chains. And basically, that mural shows kids that education is a way of liberating yourself from those chains that bind you on the streets. And so all the multicultural images were used to reflect the kids that are locked up in juvie, Samoan, Asian, Latino, African American, and that was the majority of kids that somehow get locked up. There are white kids in there too, but the majority is usually kids of color. Why that is? Who knows, right? But that mural is there to this day, and so when parents are waiting to go to court with their kids, they have that, and I hope to that kids, when they see that, they read it and say, oh yeah, maybe if I get my shit together, I won't be in court waiting right here looking at this mural, because I'll be successful. So that's basically the concept of that mural. And then I started doing commercial stuff throughout my career as an artist. And this was one that was done for a friend of mine who owned a taqueria in the Excelsior district. And I actually lived in that building. That window right there was my room. And my buddy, I got free burritos for life. That mural was just a reflection of the culture and music. He didn't really care what it was, but he just wanted to attract people to his taqueria. And I painted that in 1997. And that's Don Chuy's Taqueria on Excelsior, Naples. It's still there. It's fading away, because that was in 97. And that's one of the ones that I had fun doing, because I got to eat, I got fed. He didn't pay me that much, but I ate really well. And then this was one of my most recent ones. I painted this one in 2015, the year I retired from probation after a 25-year career in the probation department. This mural was dedicated to a woman, a queer woman, Chata Gutierrez, who was born and raised in the Mission. She was a pioneer DJ for, I don't know if you're familiar with People's Radio, KPOO on the Visadero, 89.5 on your FM dial. And they have a diverse array of programming, and they've always opened up the station to the community. And Chata was one of the pioneers who did a show called Conclave for 40 years in the Mission. And we'd listen to her show, and she brought all Latin jazz artists from New York, from all over, and opened up the station to the community to talk about police brutality, access to education, employment opportunities. She was a really dynamite person. I got to know her personally. And when she passed away, we decided to try to get a wall to dedicate her legacy on the building, and it's at the entrance to the Mission corridor on 24th Street. So when you get off the BART station and walk towards Potrero, walk east on 24th Street, this will be right at 24th, right next to the Carnival mural, with one of my other people who I admire, Daniel Galvez, painted the Carnival mural. And that's there for that. And that was one of the original Balmy Alley murals. That one was painted in 1984 by Balmy Alley was a collective of about 30 muralists who got together to say no to U.S. intervention in Central America. So another part of muralism is protest and to fight, speak truth to power. At that time, the Olympics were going on in LA in '84, and he started using helicopters to keep all the undesirable people away from the Olympics. And so Sam the Olympic Eagle was the mascot for the Olympics that year. And at the same time, the U.S. had the Iran-Contra thing where they were funding the Contras and killing people in El Salvador. And so the bird of peace, a dove, is being carried by Sam the Olympic Eagle, called Keeping the Peace in Central America. And that was my theme for that one, riding through a blown up Central American village that had just been, and the white death squads on the hand, that white hand stood for the death squads. So that mural was one of the original murals in Balmy Alley. So art was also a vehicle to protest. And this one here was a more happy mural. I painted this. It's a design for a mural at Carnival headquarters. Are you guys familiar with Carnival San Francisco, where they have the big parade and 2-day festival in the Mission every year since, I think it's the 45th anniversary coming up, since 1978. So I designed this for a mural for Carnival headquarters. It's going to be painted this year, and basically that reflects that Carnival is the heart of the city, corazón del barrio, corazón de San Pancho. San Pancho is a slang word for San Francisco because the nickname for Francisco in Spanish is Pancho. So when we say San Francisco, we really call it San Pancho. And Carnival is the heart of San Francisco. So I have the music. It's a playful mural that reflects the culture of the Mission, the Carnival dancers, the lowriders, the murals on the buildings, and everybody just having a good time. And that's what that mural reflects. So nothing political about that other than just happy. And that's the extent of my work. I continue to do work here to this day. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you so much, Carlos. That's great. Okay, our second panelist is Paul Kitagaki Jr. He's a photographer and videographer who has traveled the world covering natural and human-caused disasters. Paul's work has been honored with dozens of photo awards, including the Pulitzer Prize and Emmy nominations. He's been published in news outlets worldwide such as National Geographic, Time, Smithsonian, Sports Illustrated, People, Mother Jones, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and Washington Post. Through slow and painstaking research, Kitagaki has spent the last 15 years locating and winning the trust of the families who lived through the internment camps, documenting their stories of survival and inner strength to overcome injustice, racism, and wartime hysteria. Kitagaki's work is now in a national traveling exhibition called Gambate, Legacy of an Enduring Spirit, appearing at the Smithsonian and throughout the U.S. Fittingly, his work is also featured in the Tanforan Incarceration 1942. Here. Sorry. Oh, and his father's family was incarcerated here? Yes. Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. Let's try. I mumble. I mumble a lot. So, yeah. Hi, I'm Paul. Let's see. This place, San Bruno, Tanforan, really intersected in my life in more ways than I never knew about when I was a kid. My parents never talked about the internment, incarceration, and so I never knew about it until 10th grade. I was taking a summer school class down at Hillsdale High School in San Mateo, and I learned about they were incarcerated with 120,000 other Japanese Americans. And I was like, what the heck? How can that happen? So I went home, talked to my parents about it. This is in 1970, and I think I'm a third generation Japanese American. So we're raised to be super American. They didn't talk about the camps or anything like that. I think I remember when my parents would go grocery shopping, they would see somebody of their generation and said, "Hey, what camp were you in?" And for me, I was like a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, and camping is supposed to be fun, right? So I'm thinking, but I didn't hear the whole gist of it until 10th grade, and I was like really outraged. Because when we were kids, I grew up, my dad and my uncle were school teachers in San Francisco. I lived here in South San Francisco. We drive by the Tanforan Mall before it was the mall, to go to San Mateo to see relatives. I worked here at the JCPenney's, supporting myself to go to college. My mom worked there after at the JCPenney's, and my dad's family was incarcerated here. And now my dad and they're over across the highway at the Golden Gate National Cemetery. So this intersection it's really crazy how it's intersected my life. And now we have an exhibit here that's teaching everybody what happened here, in the Bay Area, because this is the place where most of the Bay Area Japanese Americans came before mainly shipping off to Topaz in Utah. But my approach was, for my project, my uncle told me that Nobu said, he was an artist in San Francisco, he said, Dorothea Lange photographed our family. And I'm like, Dorothea Lange? She's like one of the most famous documentary photographers, and she was one of my heroes. So I was going, wow, what's that photo look like? So in 1984, I went to the National Archives and I flipped through all these boxes of prints. They're all back there, her archives. There's like over 900 pictures that she shot around the Bay Area and all the other camps. So I'm flipping, and going, what's this photo gonna look like? And I found the picture, it's down at the exhibit, but it's my grandparents, my dad and my aunt. And then my aunt, they're dressed in their best clothes, and my grandmother's smiling at this woman, and this woman's Caucasian, white, and I'm like, why is she smiling? It's like such a terrible thing that's happening. And years later, my dad said, that's our family friend, Dorothy Hightower. And she came to wish us goodbye. And that family also had stored a lot of their personal belongings, and they also stored stuff at the Oakland Buddhist Temple. But I really wanted to know more what my family didn't talk about. And as I flipped through those pictures in the National Archives, all these faces just haunted me, looking up at me. I wanted to know what my parents didn't talk about, what that whole generation never talked about. I mean, if you go to history books, it's like, 120,000 Japanese Americans were rounded up and put in camps, and a couple paragraphs in your history class, and that's it. And a lot of times it's not spoke or taught in a lot of other areas. So I wanted to create a body of work that would help educate and actually become a voice for a lot of the subjects that are in my photographs. So a lot of the photographs were from Dorothea Lange, and it took me took me 7 years to find the first 12 people, because I'd go to Japanese American churches and say, hey, I bring a poster board of my favorite 12 pictures. Hey, do you know who's in this? Do you recognize anybody? And that's how I started. So somebody had to recognize somebody in this historical picture. You gotta remember, this is like in 1942, here it is 2000, and we're, how many years, has gone by. So a lot of those people were young, or a lot have passed away. And I kicked myself in the butt for not doing it so much earlier in my career, like in 1978 when I started as a photojournalist. But I wanted to approach it as a journalist, because I'm a journalist and a documentary photographer. So I wanted everything to be factual. So I wanted the interviews that everybody spoke and shared their stories with me. I wanted everything to be factual. So it's a learning experience for them, me, and the general public to learn what happened. So something like this would not happen again in the United States. And it's really interesting when I went to talk to people, I'd call them up on the phone, because this is before the internet, right, you guys? And call them up. After I found somebody, well, let me get back. I'm living in Sacramento, and I'm a Sacramento bee photographer, but I went to the Buddhist temple. There's always, every summer, there's a festival, right? And everybody comes, food, games, and I talked to them and I said, can I put this board up, and I put my business card there. I said, this is gonna be great, because there's some Sacramento people, and somebody's gonna call me up. And not one call. So then I talked to somebody else in the community. They said, oh, well, there's this Japanese Methodist church in Sacramento. Why don't you go there? They have a lunch for the elders. So I brought it down there, and luckily somebody said, oh, I know who that is. And I got my first lead, and I got my first, then I had to look them up, find their phone number, and then call them up. And then the interesting thing is, when somebody calls you on the phone, what do you normally do? Hang it up. So I said, don't hang up. I'm not a solicitor. And then this is my crazy. I want to take your picture. I think you're in this Dorothea Lange picture or this historical picture. And I want to take your photograph. And then I want to tell your story. And they go, oh, no, not me. Because Japanese, there's a cultural terminology, enjo, where you're not the nail that sticks up. So nobody really wanted to talk to me. So it took me a lot of convincing for them to trust me, to let me tell their story and take their photograph. And a lot of times when I went to go take their photograph, I call them up on the phone and we kind of agreed they'll let me come over. I go, well, it'll take 5 minutes, right? And I go, no, probably about an hour and a half to take the photograph. And then the interview could be how much you want to talk to me. It could be half hour, 2 hours, whatever. So it took a lot of getting into the door, having them trust me to tell their story. And at that point, I didn't have no book, no gallery, no exhibit or anything. It was just I wanted to learn more what happened. So when I took 12 years to get the first, or 7 years to get the first 12, we exhibited here at Tanforan in 2012. Bart had an Asian Pacific Art History Month, so we put it there. It was supposed to be a month. It's been there. It was there since then, and then we just redid the exhibit this year. So it's really, really incredible. So we've educated so many Bart writers who didn't know the story that this site is so important to Bay Area Japanese American history. And I have a traveling exhibit. So since that 2012, I have over 61 people I've photographed in part of my exhibit now, really rounding out the story. There's so many different, that's my parents. Can we do the next one? That's my and a lot of times I wanted to photograph everybody at the exact same location where the original photograph was taken in 1942, but a lot of times that was so hard because of logistics, somebody lived somewhere else or whatever. This is one of my favorite Dorothea Lange photographs, the Pledge of Allegiance here in San Francisco. And both families, their parents were arrested right after Pearl Harbor happened because one of them, the dad was joined some business association, so he's on a list. The other, Mary on the right, her mom taught Japanese, so she was rounded up right away. And I come to find out, how everything's so close to you guys. I found out Helene, that's the grocery store my parents would shop at, the American Fish Market in Japantown. So the sad part was Marianne, her mom died in captivity. She was at Sharp Park here in San Bruno. They separated her, and then she died separated from her family. And then they brought her back to Topaz in Utah, where the family was, and that's the first time she'd seen her mom since before the war, and she passed. This is Kiyoshi Katsumoto, and that's him. That's in Fremont area. They call it Centerville back in the day, but it's Fremont. And that's him on the left, and that's him today. So he came back. Henry DeSoto, which is Fremont DeSoto Boulevard, he was a farmer there. So that man helped his family when they came back after the war, helped save their farm. So Kiyoshi came back, ran the farm, and then he went to school and became an engineer. He ended up working for Chevron. But for him, he said the most important thing, he was a little kid though, but he remembers that number. Everybody had to wear a numbered tag with their name, and he just remembers that, and he said that all we were reduced to was a number, not a name. And that really stuck with him. We could go on. And this is Mitz Kojimoto. This is here in San Francisco, right on Venice Avenue. That's 2020 Venice Avenue. If you guys drive by there today, it's a Jiffy Lube. But that's where all the Japanese Americans that's one of the sites they had to gather in order before they were sent to camp. And he didn't go to Tanforan, this group of San Francisco. They went down to Santa Anita. but I found out from him he's a veteran. He joined the 442nd, and I'm interviewing him. After I interviewed him, he would gather a lot of information about all the other Japanese American veterans. He had this whole catalog, but later on I found out, he didn't tell me this, he was a Bronze Star winner for bravery. I mean, something, that you wouldn't know about. So all these little stories that I found, and Jerry and Karen over there, their uncle has one of the most famous Dorothy Lang photographs. It's in Oakland, California. It's a Wanto Market. Above it's a sign that says, "I'm an American." So that was Jerry and Karen's uncle that did that. So, but I think but I really wanted to learn, like I said, more that was in the history books. And I want something that was personal, because everybody relates to something that's personal in somebody's life. So then it'll span cultural differences and ethnicities, and if you're liberal, conservative, doesn't matter. If there's some kind of human element there you could connect with, that's all I want to do. Have people share and realize and have a connection. So hopefully something like this would never happen again. And I continue to work on this. I've had a lot of subjects pass away. I've started this in 2005. But I've had a lot of my subjects already pass away, because they're already in their 80s and 90s when I first photographed them. And like I said, it was a struggle to try to get in the front door. And I had some people say no. Even like my mom, she didn't want me to interview her, but my dad did. But my mom was a better storyteller. She knew more of the details than my dad did, so it was a little bit challenging. But yeah, so thank you guys for having us here, and I'll pass it on.
Wow, those are amazing photos. And there's many more, I assume.
There's over 61, and then there's also a book behind Bob Wire that's in its second edition.
Wow, 61 plus a
It's
book.
on Amazon. But you'll see the same stories that are in the same exhibits. Thanks.
Was that made into a video?
There's a little video from the California Museum they just put up on YouTube when they had the exhibit like 2 years ago. And you could hear the actual voices of the subjects. So it really makes it more powerful. So now when the exhibit travels, there's like 12 voices. So you stand in front of them, there's a QR code or something, and you could hear them speak. So it makes it such more powerful to hear the voices. So I have 61 right now in the traveling exhibit. I have 5 more that I've worked on. One guy was an animator who worked for Disney and Hanna-Barbera. He was the guy who did, the Lady and the Tramp, the spaghetti scene. He did that. He did stuff with Yogi Bear, and COVID happened and everything kind of stopped. And then I have like I said, I have a book behind Bob Wire. It's on Amazon, second printing, but it's got the exact same stories, because a lot of these pictures have at least 500 word text block. So there's a lot more than just like Joe Blow was here in San Francisco. You get a little more background and feel of that family, what happened with them, and all the struggles they had to overcome to get where we are today. And I think a lot of the Japanese Americans didn't talk about it. I think my parents and I think the other Jared, this is just me, because I think they didn't want us to be, my views to be, so I'm really mad or something, so I don't do, they want us to achieve and didn't want this to hold us back and in life. They want us to move forward, but I think it's important to learn from history. So, thanks, sorry.
Yeah, very important to learn from history, like you said, so we don't repeat it. Okay, we're going to move on to Diana Lee. Diana Lee is a curator, artist, and community arts organizer residing on, Huichin, unceded Ohlone land, also known as Oakland, California. She serves as managing director at Asian American Women Artists Association, AWA, which we've talked about. Diana has curated and managed multiple exhibitions and programs, including the United States of Asian America Festival from 2018 to 2022, Sewing Agency in 1921, Agra Rihanna 2019, I'm sorry, I probably mispronounced that. Her art and video work has shown at SOMARTS, CAMFest, Contemporary Jewish Museum, Root Division, Southern Exposure, and Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. She has an MFA in studio art from the San Francisco Art Institute and a BA in visual arts, media, and ethnic studies from UC San Diego. So please welcome Diana.
Can you all hear me? I hope you all don't mind. I didn't eat lunch, so I'm just gonna stay seated. So my name is Diana. I work for the Asian American Women Artists Association. We were founded in 1989, like Melanie mentioned earlier, by a few co-founders, Flo Oi Wong, Betty Kano, and Mills College professor, the late Moira Roth, who recently passed away. And the reason Flo, Betty, and Moira kind of gathered up was in '89. There was the National Women's Caucus for the Arts, and what happened was they were trying to bring together a bunch of slides to put into the National Archives, and they had this conference, this annual conference that Betty and Flo went to. And Betty introduced Flo to Moira, and together, Moira was the one who really advocated to get more women of color and the slides, artistic slides from women of color into those archives and into the conferences and the presentations, and to just be represented. And so she kind of empowered Flo, who found art later on in her mid, I think 50s, and encouraged her and Betty to gather a bunch of Asian American women, get their slides together, and have them be a part of the National Women's Caucus for the Art. Flo also eventually served as a board member on the National Women's Caucus for the Arts, and eventually became a huge advocate to get artist Bernice Bing, who some of you may have heard of. She's being featured, her work is being featured at the Asian Art Museum right now in San Francisco. So that's the story of AWA's founding. And that story is still relevant today in terms of how we represent Asian American women artists, and but also how we come together to produce our own stories as well, and produce them in a way that we want to be heard through our exhibitions, through our programs, and our membership. So we do have a membership program, and it's filled with artists, affiliates, and art supporters. And the reason it was set up that way was to build what I like to call an arts ecosystem, so that artists can not only feel seen by the organization, but also are getting connected with art professionals to speak in their classes, to be represented in galleries like this. So that is our membership. And I like to do this thing where if all the AWA members in the crowd can make some noise, raise their hand. Thanks for coming. And I see Sherry in the back. Sherry's one of our advisory board members, also our longest running board member until recently. And we also have Susie here, who's a current board member as well. We became a nonprofit in 2007, which is when our Cheers to Muses anthology came out, and that features a number of writings and art from Asian American women, and also dedicated to Asian American women artists. So that is a published book that is also available on Amazon and on our website, and at the East Wind bookstore in Berkeley. And so I talked about Bernice Bing, so I want to talk a little bit more about the milestone projects that AWA did. So the next one after that, so the Cheers to Muses book was released in 2007 when AWA became a nonprofit. And then a few years later, 10 years ago, this film was released in 2013, dedicated to the life and legacy and work of Bernice Bing. For folks who don't know, Bernice Bing was a trailblazing Asian American woman artist. She was also a queer artist. Well, I guess she would call herself lesbian back then. And also a trailblazing community arts organizer. So she was I think she was the second or one of the earliest directors of the Silm Arts Cultural Center. She was also part of starting the Neighborhood Arts Program, which eventually turned into the San Francisco Arts Commission. And through that program, she was also able to turn guns into art in Chinatown and encourage the youth there to trade their guns in for art and just steer them away from violence and whatnot. What else did she? I feel like I'm missing a few things, but she's done incredible things. And we co-produced this film with the Queer Women of Color Media Arts Project, which is where you can also find and reach out to them to watch it. And then, yeah. All right, yes. And so the legacies continue, right? So we want to continue highlighting the work of our artists and our founding members. And so a recent emerging project of ours is our Pass It On Oral Histories program. And so we're making more films and maybe even podcasts in the future. But this screenshot is from our first episode that we just released last summer, featuring Flo, who's on the left, Betty in the middle, and Kim Ano, who is also another founding member of AWA. And they go deep into the struggle of what it was like to gather and get themselves represented as Asian American women artists. And so for folks who can't read it, it says, "We cannot expect others to talk about us if we don't even talk about ourselves, if we don't know ourselves." And this is from a quote from Betty Cano in the film. This leads me to what more of the work that we're doing to represent contemporary artists, emerging artists, mid-career, all different levels of artists. So every other year since also 2013, almost 10 years now, we've been hosting what I like to call now our biennial exhibition at Silm Arts Cultural Center, and in partnership with the API Cultural Center. And so our next show is this April through May, Jade Wave Rising, Portraits of Power, and it's going into or responding to the anti-Asian hate that we've been feeling, the victimization of Asian women in the media currently, and responding to that in terms of how we represent our own stories from a place of power. So that is, the dates are right there, April 28th through May 21st this year. So please come by to that. And we also have other events that we do throughout the year, Women's History Month. And if you join our membership, you could also join our monthly art salons, which we have one tomorrow. If you're a writer, we have Bonnie Wiley Kwong, who is a writer, is doing a workshop on how to get published, if anyone's interested in that. Yeah. Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Diana. Okay, and we're gonna end up with our last speaker, Patricia A. Montgomery. Patricia A. Montgomery is a textile and installation artist. Her artwork focuses on African American historical and mythical stories. Her historical story quilts, transformed into swing coats, represent unknown heroines from the civil rights movement and their significant contributions to the most critical movement of the 20th century. Born in Biloxi, Mississippi, and raised in Hempstead, New York, until 1979, Montgomery earned her MFA, Master of Fine Arts, from John F. Kennedy University in Berkeley and a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Holy Names College. She currently resides in Concord, California. Patricia.
It doesn't say the last last. That's for last.
Do you want the mic or no?
No, I don't.
All righty.
I got a big mouth. I work, this series is real important to me because even though I grew up in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, in that era of time when growing up, there was little talk about civil rights, because I grew up in the North, and so civil rights in the North was very different from civil rights in the South. And even though I was born in Mississippi, I never lived there. And so Black history was never taught to me when I was in high school. I actually took Black history when I was in college. So by the time I got ready to create a body of work about this whole concept, I decided, well, I'm gonna do swing coats, and I want them to be lined up, hung from the ceiling to the wall, and it would look like a march, and people would be able to interact with them and learn more about these women. And these women were the backbone of civil rights. We know a lot about all the male leaders, a great deal of them, but there were many, many women that were the behind the scenes. I have a total of 20 coats that tells the story of 20 different women that we really don't know a lot about. And this particular woman here, her name is Tina Clark. She was the woman that did, she's called the Freedom Teacher. She taught people, African Americans, how to read. And one of the ways she did that was with a Sears catalog. And she also started various schools and everything in order for us to learn. And she also did it in a way where not only did she teach us how to read, she also wanted us to be able to vote. Now, we all know, I'm not sure that all of you know this, but African Americans really were challenged when it came for us trying to vote. We had to know, we had to play games practically when you went to vote. You had to answer questions. You had to know the Constitution. You had, and anything you answered incorrectly, you wouldn't get your pass to vote. You wouldn't be able to vote. So her job throughout her life was to teach people to read, to be able to vote, to be able to do better. And that was the one thing I really learned about the civil rights movement. We don't give it a lot of credit. And it's a very important movement in the history of the world itself. Because without the civil rights movement, all these other movements would not exist. And that's something that we really don't give that play a lot of play for. And the civil rights movement also too was all about just having a better life. I want to go to a better school. I want a better job. I want to be able to vote. I want to be able to shop where I want to shop. So she taught us how to read. She was a reader. She was the person who taught reading. Joanne Robinson. We all know about the Montgomery bus boycott. We all know that Rosa Parks wouldn't give up her seat, and the next day, the Montgomery bus boycott happened. But we don't really know how it all got set up. Joanne Robinson was a teacher at that time. And the day that Rosa Parks got arrested, Joanne Robinson went to her university that she was teaching at, got her students, and they made flyers on mimeograph machines, and they sent them to the African American community and told them to stay off the bus the next day. They not only stayed off the bus one day, they stayed off the bus for an entire year. And I even have a quote in the series of quotes where there's a young girl that was thrown off the bus way before Rosa Parks. And her lawsuit goes through the Supreme Court, and that's when the year afterwards it's unconstitutional. Whenever you see the real code, so one side is when it started, the other side is the law being unconstitutional, and the back of the code represents how people got to work. They walked, they worked, they shared rides and all kinds of things. And the numbers on the sleeves are the arrest numbers of individuals, including Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King's arrest numbers are on the sleeves. Josephine Baker. Now, Josephine Baker is a very interesting individual because her whole concept was, and she was a part of all of the groups. She was part of the NAACP, you know, SNCC and all of them, all of the organizations at that time.
Not
But,
the dancer.
Huh?
Not the dancer.
Right, not the dancer. She didn't dance. Well, wait a minute. She may have danced, but she didn't dance like that Josephine made. And so her whole thing was, she felt that people could be leaders without being a part of an organization. So her purpose throughout the civil rights, including, it was also a part of Fannie Lou Hamer's outcome too, was to teach these people how to be leaders on your own, how to stand up, how to take part of. And a lot of times we look at like movies like Eye on the Prize and so forth, and we feel that those were adults. Those were children in those movies. They were teenagers, because if adults took part in all of that stuff, many of them would lose their jobs, lose their livelihood, and sometimes even their life. So she was a very community leader that thought people should be their own leader. This is my favorite person, one of my favorite persons that I did. Her name is Dorothy Hyatt. Dorothy Hyatt lives a very long life. She is very much a part of the Washington scene. In fact, Obama calls her the godmother of the civil rights movement. And she really was. And it's very interesting because her story is intense. You read about her and the way they talk about her and what she's done. She's accomplished a lot because she lives a long time. But there's a chapter in the book, and it's towards the end of the book. And Dorothy Hyatt was someone that no one could tell her no. If you told her no, she would go walk right up to you and say, yes, I'm doing this. I got this. I'm getting it. I'm doing it. You know, that was Dorothy Hyatt, right? So anyway, she decided that on Pennsylvania Avenue, they were going to get this building for their organization. Now, in those days, African Americans didn't own property on Pennsylvania Avenue. And down the street from the White House, it was totally uncalled for, unheard of at all. So what she does all her fundraising, everything, she buys the building. And it's right down the street. But then there's another part of the story that's in that chapter about two young girls. They were runaway slaves, and they were caught, and they were resold. So, the same building, in the picture you see two buildings. The building on the right-hand side is the main building that was bought on Pennsylvania Avenue. That building now teaches and trains African-American women to be leaders, you know, governors, etc. And in that same place where that building is, used to be a slave market where they sold us. So it's sort of like all of a sudden that karma got changed because we went from being sold to becoming major leaders within the organization itself. And she was really powerful in that sense. And the story stuck with me so much that when I created her story, I had to add that to her coat and make it a lot more personal. Besides adding the hat, Dorothy Hyatt wore hats, and so we added the hat as well. But the series is complete, just about. I have one more coat to complete and made it. It just came home back to me from the National Quilt Museum in Paducah, which was a very successful show. And I'm now beginning to work on a new series of works that will be telling the story of domestic violence using wedding garments and coats and dresses. And their stories will be embroidered throughout those garments. I really feel sometimes that it took me a long time before I came to this part of art in my life, because I was always the creative person that wanted color and movement and just art to be beautiful in a lot of ways. And it wasn't until I had to apply for a grant to come up with a story and make it happen. But the research that I did and learning about these women are, you know, something that I will never lose, and it's very important. So even though they don't teach civil rights in schools, or you see all of the movies, Eye on the Prize and some of the others, take a moment sometimes and take a person and try to learn a little bit about their lives. You'll feel and you'll understand that their lives aren't that much different from yours. They struggled, and all they really wanted to do was just have a better life. And that's the real story about the civil rights movement. So thank you.
Oh my goodness, this is so wonderful to hear all of your different stories and hear about your work. I think we have, what, 15 minutes maybe to take questions. If anybody in the audience has a question they wanted to, okay. Do you want a microphone?
I have a question for Carlos. I've always wondered about this. You go into neighborhoods where there's a lot of graffiti, a lot of tagging, but there's one thing that I've noticed, that when there's a mural, nobody seems to do any damage. Is there some kind of code of ethic amongst, gang members or people who have a tendency to do destructions, to leave the murals alone?
So the question is, a lot of the murals are not tagged by gang members or other folks, and why is that?
It's a little bit of both. The artist, if the artist isn't from the community that comes in to do a mural in gang territory, if he's gonna do the job right, he's going to get to the community leaders in that area, whatever organization is there, and try to find out who the neighborhood kids are, especially the gang kids, and do some outreach, and then include them, approaching them. Sometimes that's hard to do because gang members don't want to be infiltrated. They might think you're a cop. So the approach has to be one where you know somebody who knows somebody and say, oh, this guy is cool. And then you meet with them and let them know what you're trying to do. I want to do a mural that instills community pride and include some of the kids from the neighborhood. Even gang members will participate if they do. And they'll have a sense of ownership. And in doing that, they tend to protect it rather than deface it, because they took part of it and they were included in the making of the mural. Sometimes when you see murals that are painted over, it's because the artist may not have done that in the community where they're painting. They might be an outsider who just comes in and gets paid and leaves, and so the kids aren't going to respect that. They're going to tag it. But if you include the community in the making of the mural and why you're there, and have them have a say, the 9 times out of 10 it'll be protected and not vandalized.
So it's all about working with the folks that you're making the art in their communities and their neighborhoods,
Yeah,
right?
respect.
Respecting them, yeah. All right, who else has got a question? Okay.
Hi, this is for, I'm sorry, is it Paul? Yeah, and this may be more of a comment than a question, and you can certainly respond to it, and that is, you were talking about how your grandparents didn't want to talk about their experiences in the camps, and I was just thinking how my own ancestors sort of a parallel situation. They were Jews who came over from Eastern Europe, and obviously the conditions, they were terrible, and they never talked about it because they wanted to forget about it,
It's even worse than that. I couldn't speak Japanese, so I couldn't communicate with my grandparents.
Oh.
I mean, so many of my generation, I didn't go to Japanese school or do any of that kind of stuff, so couldn't communicate with them. So, but I mean, it's my parents' generation. They're that in-between generation, that second generation, that they didn't talk about it either because they wanted something better for us. I think they felt shame and guilt for doing nothing wrong but being locked up behind barbed wire, and I think they wanted to move past that.
Hi, I'm Susie Kagami. I'm on the board of AWA, and I just first of all want to thank Diana and Melanie and the staff of AWA, because I think they're doing an incredible job in bringing this kind of program to all of us. Paul, I really appreciate what you're doing. So I'm Beyonce, 4th generation. That photo of the kids was the elementary school that my mother-in-law would have gone to if she wasn't incarcerated when she was 5 years old. She lived on Bush Street. But that school now is called Rosa Parks Elementary School. It's right between San Francisco, Japantown, and the Fillmore District. So the Western Addition, when that time of incarceration happened, our communities with the African American community came together and really supported each other. But my son went to Rosa Parks, graduated from Rosa Parks in the Japanese bilingual program that is there now. And it's the generational piece that you talked about. So my son pushes me to help Japantown and Western Addition heal through all of that incarceration. And this April, I'm actually starting an arts hub in Japantown called Coho SF, cohosf.org, to help sort of steward in this next generation of Japanese Americans that now, for my son's generation to really have a voice in Japantown and start really talking to those things. So I just want to say thank you so much for the work that you've done, because I think through your conversations with those people and amplifying that voice, the whole Enyo not wanting to stick out hasn't really served our community in the third generation, fourth generation. So it's really this younger generation that's uplifting us and pushing us to find their voice and to find like who they are in this world. So, but it's through your work that helps. So thank you so much.
A question for Carlos. What's the significance of the Egyptian pharaoh in one of those murals? I saw that and I was looking at all the images. And
Just reflecting African culture in the mural.
thank you.
And it was a beautiful image. And so I saw the exhibit and I said, oh man, that's really cool, you know.
I think it's cool too, thank you.
I think this person.
Hey, Cookie, is the Carlos Santana mural still there, or is that a lost?
It's not there anymore. The parking lot that was in front of it belonged to a mortuary, which went out of business, and the gentleman sold the business and the lot, and the developer came in and built an apartment building right in front of it. It is what it is. Gentrification, baby.
I have a question for Patricia. I know you said 61 coats of it, or how many coats?
20.
Sorry.
Don't give me 61, baby girl. It was a lot doing 20, okay?
I'm like reaching into my question, which is, so you have 20. Are you planning to add other more women like figures from that time, or from maybe present time, to add to the collection? Because like you said, these are women that people don't know about, and they should know about them because of the wonderful, amazing work that's inspiring us even today. So I'm just wondering if you have plans to just keep going with the series, or what's next for you?
What's next? Well, actually, I think one of the things I do want to do is to finally do the last coat. I have to do the research for the last coat that I want to do. I have 20 made, and I really feel that someone else will be picking up that mantle and doing something differently to tell those stories about those women, because I'm moving on to creating wedding dresses and wedding coats to tell the story of domestic violence. It's time for new work. I've worked on this series for 4 years, and as an artist, I normally create new work every year, and this was the first time I hadn't done that, and now that I'm doing the new work regarding domestic violence, there's a lot of research, and I want to tell those stories on those types of garments and create a wedding fashion show and everything, and have that show become a traveling show to tell those stories and to bring alive the whole sense of what happens when you get married and you go from that very blissful, happy day to something so totally horrible, maybe, so that's another story that can be told. But I'm hoping someone else says, oh, I want to learn more about this. Oh, what can I do? How can I do that? And not just, do a coat, but take it further.
I had a question for Paul. One of my cousins was contacted by a Japanese American friend who saw one of his relatives in one of those Dorothy Lang photos and wanted to know who he might contact to offer this information. I don't know if anybody's collecting this. Should I let them contact you?
Yeah.
I'll get your information.
You know, I'm still looking for people, but there's not that many people left.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially the original people, I mean, the older, like the 20-something-year-olds, those people are all gone.
Okay.
And so some of it I've been able to tell through the next generation, like with Jerry and Karen, because their uncle wasn't, you know, their parents were all gone, so I told it through their generation, through their, whatever family history they knew.
Okay.
So I've been able to do that too.
So do you have like a website online or anything?
Website.
Okay.
It's Kitagaki.
Great, thank you.
It's on the, well, just look under my last name, if you look under the program, it's Kitagaki.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
The Library of Congress is still collecting information on all the photographs, the blank photographs. So
And there's also like, there's over 7,000 photographs in the National Archives.
Yeah, National Archives.
And then the Library of Congress has another set of photos, and then the Library of Congress has all the Ansel Adams photos that he shot in Anzanar.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I think that, like you said, the National Archives actually been adding metadata, like who's in the photos, to the photos.
Okay, great.
They're actively soliciting any information on the photos.
Okay, thank you.
Dorothy Lang, like she had like people rushing around.
Yeah.
Didn't want her to talked to, like, there was like, she had a really hard time working because the government, even though she's working for the government, the War Relocation Authority, the soldiers, whoever is in charge, didn't want her taking photographs. And then talking and getting more information from the subjects.
Right.
So she had really hard struggles just trying to make the images she was making. And a lot of her images, I don't know if you guys are familiar with, they were censored by the US government. So there's a print that says censored on it.
I think maybe one more question, if some folks who has a question. Anyone? Oh, everybody's shy. No? Okay, well, maybe if you want to just come up and talk to the panelists afterwards. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and the panelists, thank you so much for sharing your wonderful artwork with us. And I guess there'll be another tour at 4 o'clock, right? Yes? Oh, it's 3:30. Oh my gosh, it's 3:30 now. Okay, so please, if you'd like to join, now would be the time.